Hello and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep IAS. Let's begin today's session of the Hindu analysis with the first article that is on a very interesting topic. The author here, who is a visiting professor at the Goa University, points out towards the fact that in the past few years there have been a lot of amazing medical science discoveries that have taken place across the world. But one of the problems with these discoveries is that in India specifically, we don't really have a lot of debate on this topic. When a new technology comes in the Western world, we just adopt it as it is without having a debate about whether or not is it good, whether or not is it ethical enough or not, whether or not there are privacy concerns, etc. What he's trying to say is that people in India right now are not really giving a lot of emphasis to their privacy, to the ethics of technology that is being adopted, etc. And we need to pay more attention to that. He starts with a simple example. Recently, there has been a new product introduced in the Western market called the Facebook Smart Glasses. They're also called the new Ray-Ban. So basically, these are glasses that you can wear and they will automatically record whatever is going on around you. So for example, you are meeting your friend, you are in a concert, you are in an important meeting, just wearing normal glasses, but they will be acting like a camera and they will keep on recording everything that is going on around you. Now, for some people who are very active on social media, that might be a very cool feature because now you will be able to upload a lot of things on Instagram and Facebook, etc. But the problem is, this is a clear interference in our right to privacy. Such discoveries in science and technology cannot be adopted without a proper discussion. Whether or not a person is comfortable enough to share his or her private life should be a matter of discussion. For example, would you want a friend of yours to wear these glasses in a family get-together or in a friend's get-together and then post that video and then edit that video and post it as a story on Instagram, etc.? First, we need to have a debate around this and only then we can go ahead and adopt technology. So in India, whenever the question of science and technology comes in, we don't really pay a lot of attention to the ethical dilemma. Now, while this is just a one-off example that the author gives in the beginning of the article, the main point of this article is related to organ donation, which is also known as xenotransplantation. The author here says that in the past few months, there have been three major findings in this field that can prove to be a game changer. The first finding was that in New York, a medical team attached a kidney from a gene-edited animal to a person who was declared brain dead to see if the animal kidney was able to work properly or not, and it did work properly. It was able to process the waste and produce urine that a normal human kidney does. So it was found out that if an animal whose gene is edited to make it similar to that of a human body, the kidney of that animal can work in a human body as well. The second discovery is from Maryland, that again is in US, where a team of doctors used a heart of an animal which was genetically modified, and then that heart was placed inside a patient who had run out of all other options. In fact, if you would have read in the newspaper, it was covered widely. This was a heart from a pig. The third discovery was in Germany, where a doctor has been developing a farm to cultivate genetically modified organs, especially for the purpose of transplant. Now, the one thing common in all these three discoveries is that the animal that was used to get organ or the tissue was actually a pig. The reason is that pig is regarded as the animal whose organs are currently best suited for humans in a lot of respects. Now, while this kind of a technology can be a game changer in countries around the world, this also gives rise to a lot of questions, especially in the Indian society, where people have a very drastic view of the pig as an animal. Most people in India do not consider pig as a fine animal for various purposes. But even before jumping to the question of whether pig can be used for this purpose or not, in India specifically, we have never had a debate on the ethical point of view on such issues. For example, is it fine to take out an organ from an animal body and use it in a human body? In other words, is it fine to give clear preference to saving a human life as compared to an animal life? Because if you're taking out this organ from an animal, that means you're endangering that animal's life and you are giving a preference to the human life over it. We have never had a question on debate over that ethical point of view. It ignores the rights of the animals completely. There are organizations such as PETA, etc. that work for the animal rights that would not be in favor of such a process taking place openly. Mahatma Gandhi himself was a person who opposed the practice of vivisection. Vivisection is a practice of performing operations on live animals for the purpose of experimentation. For example, in a lot of bio classes, you would have seen that teachers bring frogs and the dissection of frogs happens. So all that is vivisection. That is experimenting on an animal body to see if it would work for the human interest or not. There are animal rights groups that have said that these practices should be banned across the world, but there is a clear preference given to the human life over animal life around the world. Most people believe that it is better to kill an animal to save a human being. For example, whenever you see an outbreak, for example, let's say there is a news of swine fever or swine flu, you see that the countries across the world take action to kill thousands of animals who can be responsible for spreading such a virus or such a disease. So it is a very common practice to kill animals even when we have the slightest of danger from them. In India, we have never discussed these questions. And because that animal that is under consideration right now is a pig, that leaves all the more questions for the Indian society, where eating of pork in many parts is not considered as a good practice. In fact, the people who are dealing in pigs are usually given a low social status. Even asking such questions is considered as as a taboo exercise. In that aspect, what would the medical community do and what would the government do? For example, there is a person on his or her deathbed, and the only option for that person is to get an organ transplanted from a pig. Would that person allow it or not, depending on the religious views, is still something that we have never had a debate about. And the author says, as an evolved society, it is time to take up such important matters. Now, the reality is that India, being a developing country, would not have a debate on a lot of topics where the developed nations have debates. I'll give you a few examples. Developed nations such as US have open debates about a lot of important topics. For example, debates on topics such as gender pay gap, pro-birth versus pro-choice, these have never been a part of Indian discussion because we have not evolved to that level. For instance, in the US, there's a big debate on gender pay gap, which means that women have the right to be paid equally as compared to the men if they are doing the same job with same qualifications, which does not usually happen. Secondly, there's a big debate in the US about pro-birth versus pro-choice. In other words, should abortion be allowed or not? Should it be the choice of the mother? Does the mother want to give birth to the child or not? There are some people who are pro-birth, who say that abortion is against the religion, it should not be allowed. Then there are other people who are pro-choice, who say that it should be the choice of the mother whether or not she has to go ahead with the birth of the child. These are open debates that take place in the US and other developed nations, while we as a society are not as evolved to handle those questions, and our debates and our topics are still at least 50 to 70 years behind what the developed countries are debating right now. So maybe there will be a time in the future that we will take up these ethical matters also as a part of our common debate. Now, because the topic in the article is about transplantation of organs, it is important to note what is the present status of organ transplantation in India. Now, in 2019, the government of India implemented the National Organ Transplant Program in order to promote the diseased organ donation. Organ donation in India specifically has been lacking. The number of organs available for transplant are much lower than the current demand that we have. The law about organ donation in India is the Transplantation of Human Organs and Tissue Act of 1994. Now, under the current law, there are different types of organ donations. There can be two types of donors. One, deceased, who have passed away, and others, those who are living donors. Both of these can donate their organs. For the purpose of this act, a person who is brain dead is also considered as a deceased person. So a living donor must be above 18 years of age, and they can only donate to their immediate blood relatives or in special cases out of affection or attachment towards the recipient. For example, there's a person whose both kidneys have failed. Now that person usually looks for a kidney from the other person who is from the same family. So this is an example of a living donor donating an organ to the recipient. Then there's a category of deceased donors. Deceased donors usually can donate kidneys, liver, heart, lungs, pancreas, intestines, etc. Uterus transplant can also be performed, but uterus per se is not really regarded as a life-saving organ. For transplantation from a deceased donor, consent has to be taken from the family of the person. Living donor, on the other hand, as we discussed, can donate one of their kidneys, a portion of their pancreas, or a part of the liver, because liver is one of those organs that can grow over time, and even a small part can grow into a full liver over time. This 2019 program that we talked about also establishes the national level tissue bank for storing tissues at the National Organ Tissue Transplantation Organization of Delhi. Under the same law, we have a body called the National Organ Tissue Transplant Organization that is working under the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare to promote the idea of organ transplantation in India. Now, despite a lot of awareness being raised in this matter over the past few years, as I said earlier, the number of organs that are needed in India and the number of organs that are available, there is a big mismatch between the two. The one country which has been able to solve this problem very well is Spain. What has Spain done? Why is it that their organ donation platform is amongst the best in the world? So, Spain is considered to have the highest organ donation rate in the world. One of the main reasons why they have been able to do this is a system of opt out. So, let's take an example. Let's assume in India, if I have to decide that after my death, I want to donate my eyes or other organs. For that purpose, I'll have to fill up a form, take permission from the authorities, submit the form, etc. So in India, we follow an opt-in system. If you have not opted in, you will not be able to donate your organ. In Spain, on the other hand, by default, everyone is considered as an organ donor only. If you have to opt out that I don't want to donate organs, for that you will have to fill up the form. For that purpose, you will have to make sure that the form is submitted, you get permission from the authorities, etc. So Spain follows an opt-out system. By default, everyone is considered as a participant, but if you don't want your organs to be donated, only then you will have to fill up the form. So that is why Spain has been extremely successful in ensuring that there are a lot of organs available in case someone needs it. Not just this, in case of Spain, circulatory death, that is when heartbeat or breathing stops, that also is considered as a form of death only, rather than considering only brain death as a part of death. Apart from that, the country also gives a lot of emphasis on organ donation in patients that are older than 65 years of age. That is why Spain has been able to set a positive example of organ transplantation for nations across the world. The next article that we have here focuses on a report that has recently come out in Lancet, that is a scientific journal, that talks about the number of children that have unfortunately been orphaned in India because of COVID. Because the report gives a very high number and says that about 19 lakh children in India have been orphaned, the government, as expected, has opposed the report and said that the numbers are fudged. From the government's point of view, the government says that the data according to the National Commission for Protection of Child Rights says that the number of children who have been orphaned in India during COVID are far lower. That is only 1.53 lakh as compared to 19 lakh number that is given by the Lancet. And that is why the government does not seem to be happy with the publication. Now, while this number 1.53 in itself is a very large number, but the government says that it is an attempt to lower the prestige of India at the international stage. The Indian government on its part has been announcing a lot of plans to support these children who have lost their parents during COVID-19. Not just the central government, the state governments also have announced some rehabilitation plans for these children specifically. Let me give you an example of some of these initiatives. So at the center government level, the Prime Minister had announced that a corpus of 10 lakh rupees would be created for each child from the PM Cares Fund till the time that these children reach the age of 18 years. They will be given a monthly financial assistance from 18 years of age for the next 5 years, so till 23, to take care of their personal requirements. And then when they become 23, they will be given a corpus amount as a one-time payment for their personal and professional use. Apart from that, every child that has lost a parent will be admitted to the nearest school, and the expenditure on the uniform, textbook, notebooks, etc. will also be taken care of from the PM Cares Fund only. Every child in this case can also be enrolled under the Ayushman Bharat scheme to get a health insurance of up to rupees 5 lakh, and the premium for all these children till the age of 18 years will be paid by the PM Cares Fund only. Now, as I said, apart from the central government initiatives, many state governments also have taken similar initiatives respectively. Let me give you a few examples. I am just giving you 4 examples here, but there are many other states also like Karnataka, etc. that have taken other initiatives. UP government, for example, launched the Mukhyamantri Bal Seva Yojana for children who are in distress. They will be given a monthly allowance of rupees 4,000, and their education and nutritional needs will be taken care of by the government until they turn 18. Maharashtra has announced that a fixed deposit of rupees 5 lakh will be done in the name of the child, which he or she would be able to withdraw once the child achieves the age of 21 years. Kerala, on the other hand, has announced a monthly amount of rupees 2,000 until the child's 18th birthday and a lump sum amount of rupees 3 lakh as the immediate help to be given to the child. Uttarakhand again is an example. They will be giving rupees 3,000 per month under the Vatsalya Yojana expenses that will be borne by the state. Also, after they attain the age of 21 years, they will be given reservation in the state government jobs. So these are just some of the initiatives that the state governments are taking to help these unfortunate children in India. The next article that we have here says that the AIIB, that is the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, has decided that the project that they have sponsored in Russia and Belarus will be put on hold and they will be reviewed again. This, as you know, comes in the backdrop of the continuing Russian invasion on Ukraine and Belarus being one of the few nations that have openly supported Russia and held the Russian army in invading Ukraine. Now, the AIIB has Russia as its third largest shareholder. China has the largest shareholding in AIIB at 26.5%. India is the second highest, and then comes Russia at the third place with close to 6% voting share. Interestingly, even Belarus is a member of the bank. Now, in order to take this decision, the bank did not really have to vote. It was just an executive decision taken by the president and the board of the bank. The bank in the official statement said it stands ready to extend financing flexibly and quickly and support the members who have been adversely impacted by the war directly or even indirectly. The other interesting part is that the two largest shareholders of the bank, that is India and China, both of them abstained from voting when the resolutions were introduced against the Russian invasion on Ukraine. Now, these two countries are on a kind of a similar boat. Both of these do not want to go against Russia for their own interest, and on the other hand, also want to show to the world that we are against the idea of the war. And that is why they had to do something in order to show to the world that we are not really supporting Russia, at least in this particular venture. While China has been giving remarks such as we respect the sovereignty of Ukraine, we would be ready to help the Ukrainian country, etc. India, on the other hand, has announced that we will be sending humanitarian aid, including medicines, etc., to Ukraine. These two countries have decided that maybe one other way to show to the world that we are against the war is by taking this measure, by putting on hold the projects that AIIB has sponsored in these two nations. Now, just to give you an idea, the latest UN resolution against Russia that took place on the 2nd of March, this was a voting pattern. If you can actually see, there are only 5 nations, including Russia, that voted against Ukraine and in favor of Russia. There are no surprises for guessing. There is Belarus here, there is Russia, there is North Korea, which again would love a war, there is Eritrea of North Africa, and there is the Syrian Republic, that is Syria. The Syrian government, as you know, was held by Vladimir Putin when he sent his air force in the Syrian civil war. Apart from that, there are 34 nations that abstained from voting in this resolution, which includes obviously India, it includes China also, it includes other nations such as Iran, Iraq, Kazakhstan, Mongolia, which is again a Russian neighbor, Pakistan, since Imran Khan was just in Russia, and even Bangladesh. Interestingly, there was a news yesterday that a Bangladeshi ship that is in Ukraine was hit by a Russian missile, and apparently one of the sailors in the ship had actually passed away. Now, while AIIB was in the news when it was formed and for 2 or 3 more years, recently, apart from this one, we have not had a lot of news about AIIB. Before this, the last news that we had about AIIB was that in October 2021, the government of India had approached the bank for getting a loan to buy about 66.7 crore doses of the COVID-19 vaccine. So, just a refresher about the AIIB, the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, that came into being in 2015 and started its operations in Jan 2016. It is headquartered in China, Beijing, and is a way for China, India, and other nations to establish a parallel financial structure globally, which is not really controlled by the Western nations, because there is a perception that organizations such as the World Bank and IMF are really highly controlled by US and the other Western nations. The AIIB list on its website a lot of their achievements. For example, as per the website, by end of 2020, they had over 103 members, which accounted for about 79% of the global population and 65% of the global GDP. As per the bank, the three major rating agencies around the world, that is Standard & Poor's, Moody's and Fitch, have all given it the highest credit rating. So the working of the bank has been extremely efficient. The bank has also been given a status of permanent observer in the UN General Assembly and the Economic and Social Council. With respect to India specifically, AIIB has given more loans to India than any other country. See, one thing about India is that we know how to take advantage of any bank, be it the World Bank or AIIB. Whenever we become a member, we make sure that we are getting adequate help from that bank. So India, apart from being the second largest shareholder, has also been the largest recipient of aid or loans from the AIIB, with about $6.7 billion in loans coming to 28 projects in India. Also, one other thing that you need to understand is the bank's announcement of stopping its projects in Russia is not a huge announcement because there were only one or two projects in Russia that had the investment of AIIB. So it's not like after this announcement, Russia would be so scared that they will move back from Ukraine. It's more of a symbolic gesture to show to the Western world that nations such as China and India also don't openly support the war if they're not voting against Russia. The next article that we have here talks about the increasing trade deficit in India, which as per the experts would go on increasing for the coming months and would also lead in increasing of the current account deficit. Now this headline is actually based on a report from Nomura, that is a very famous financial services group. In their report, they said that India's trade deficit has reached about $21.2 billion in the month of Feb 2022, and the current account deficit could raise up to 2.6% of the GDP, which was about 1.7% the last year. There are many factors that are listed in this report for this trade deficit, which include surging oil prices. As you know, the major impact of Ukraine-Russia war on India would be the surging oil prices in the international market. Apart from that, the domestic demand is picking up. Demand picking up means the people now are consuming more fuel and more fuel has to be imported from outside. That has meant that India's import bill will increase considerably. There is a price rise that is being seen in commodities, fertilizers, even the gold imports are increasing because the people are seeing that the share market is going down considerably. There's a lot of volatility. So most of the people are taking out money from the shares and they are putting it in the gold. That is why the gold prices are increasing, and the gold import also is at a very high level because India is importing a lot of gold from the other nations. All that has meant that we will see increasing inflation in the coming months as per the report. The article also says that the Brent crude oil prices just touched $120 per barrel, which is extremely high, considering the fact that we discussed earlier as well that the union budget assumed that the average oil price for this year would be $75 a barrel. So there's a difference of $45 a barrel price that we had not expected at the time of the budget. That is why our expectations of current account deficit and the real current account deficit for India would be very, very different. The report also says that a 10% rise in the global oil prices can widen India's current account deficit by 0.3%. Now let's see this. From $75 a barrel, the price has reached about $120. So basically it's a $45 increase. In terms of percentage, it is close to a 60% increase in the oil price. So a 10% oil rise increase means current account deficit will increase by 0.3%. So a 60% increase in the oil prices would mean about 1.8% increase in the current account deficit as compared to our GDP, which is a huge number, and that is why it is an extremely worrying sign for India in the coming months. Now, just to show you the latest numbers, it is not that the trade deficit has just increased in the month of February. I am showing you data from the last 1 year from the Ministry of Commerce and Industry website. If you actually see here, the trade deficit has been extremely big since September 2021. In September 2021, it touched $22.6 billion, while the highest level was in November 2021, where it touched $22.9 billion, which is not a very healthy sign for the Indian economy right now. Now, I'm sure you have read what exactly is trade deficit. Trade deficit very simply means the difference between what the country earns from its export and what we pay for importing. If we are paying more money for importing stuff, that means we are in a trade deficit. If we are earning more money by exporting more stuff, that means we are in a trade surplus. So when a country is showing trade deficit, that means two things. One, the demand in the domestic economy is so high that the domestic producers are not able to fulfill that demand. That can be one. For instance, take the example of milk. Now, India produces the highest amount of milk in the entire world, but still, so high is the demand for milk that we still have to import milk from some other nations. The second reason behind a trade deficit can be lack of competitiveness in the Indian industry. For example, if an Indian car manufacturer needs steel, they will import steel from China because the same quality of steel from China is at a much lower price as compared to the steel that they will buy in India. That will also lead to a trade deficit. So in this case, we have the material available in India, but just that it is not competitive enough and is not on the right price. Usually, in case of India, it is a mixture of the two. Now, because the article says that increasing trade deficit will lead to widening of the current account deficit, it is also important to know what is the connection between the two. Now, we understood the concept of trade deficit. That is, while trading, if the country has to pay more money as compared to what it is earning in that trade. Trade deficit is usually the largest component of the current account deficit. But current account deficit, when you calculate that, apart from trade numbers, you also include foreign aid that we are getting, international investment that we are getting, what money is going outside, what money is coming into India. All of that combined will tell us the exact current account deficit that we have. So in simple terms, a nation having current account deficit means a nation that sends out more money as compared to what it receives, including trade, investment, etc. Now, before you assume that current account deficit means a weak country or a weak economy, let me tell you a very interesting fact. US has almost always had the world's largest current account deficit, meaning that it is not always true that a large current account deficit means you are a very poor or a weak economy. Not just this, even when you talk about trade deficit, US has always been the world's largest trade deficit nation just because the consumption in the US and demand in the US economy is so high that they import a lot of stuff from the nations across the world. In August 2021, the trade deficit of US was over $73 billion and it is only increasing. But as long as the people in US have the capacity to pay, as long as the US government has the capacity to import all these things, their economy is not in a danger. Also, because they have the capacity to print the standard world currency, that is dollar, the US might not be as worried about the current account deficit as a country such as India would be. The next article is about the Bihar Chief Minister making a statement which is very unusual for a person who is sitting at such a high position. He said in the Bihar Assembly that I am surprised to see how so many boys and girls from India go to such remote countries such as Ukraine for study. Now, although the number of Indian students going to Ukraine has always been high due to various reasons that we will discuss, just that it has become a part of the national media and national debate now because Russia has attacked Ukraine. The statement given by Chief Minister Nitish Kumar in the Assembly, that is why, has raised a lot of eyebrows. A BJP MLA from the state of Bihar only, in response, said that an MBBS degree in a private medical college in India costs about 15 lakh rupees annually, which is almost 3 times as compared to the cost that the students have to pay in other countries such as Ukraine, Nepal, Philippines, China, and others. Now, which is a fact. There is no hiding from this. That is why somewhere between 18 to 20,000 students of India are in Ukraine right now. Now, the reality is that medical education in India is extremely costly if you are not able to get into a government college. And because the government medical colleges in India have so few seats, for most of the people, their dream of getting an MBBS degree from a government college remains a dream. And that is why there are two options available in front of them. Either to join a private medical college in India, which will charge you 15 to 20 lakh per year, or to opt for these nations, which will drastically cut down the cost. Now, if you are from the medical field, or if you are someone who has been preparing for MBBS or who has done MBBS, you will be very familiar with these ads. These ads are seen in the newspaper continuously. highlighting how you can come and do MBBS in Russia, Ukraine, etc. at a lower fee. And that is what adds to the attraction of these nations. That is why we see so many students, not just from India, but also African nations where the income capacity is lower, going to nations such as Ukraine to pursue their medical dream. As per the data of the Ukrainian government, there are about 76,000 foreign students in Ukraine, out of which India accounts for almost 20,000 students. That is the highest number of students from any country in Ukraine. Most of them are studying medicine, while some of them from African nations have also come to study engineering and business. Now, why is it that Ukraine has become such an attractive destination from them? Now, it might come as a surprise to those who have not been following this, but again, those who are from the medical field would know that this is a long tradition. Ukraine has appealed to the foreign students for such a long time, going back to the Soviet era, since there was a lot of investment done by the nation in their higher education. Also, lower fee does not really mean that they are substandard education. The standard of education in Ukraine is considered as very good, and a Ukrainian degree is accepted in almost all parts of the world, including Europe. That is why Ukrainian universities are considered as a gateway for a job in European market. The courses are affordable, most of them are offered in English, and it is very easy to get a visa into Europe once you have a Ukrainian degree. That is why it is a very attractive destination for the students. For MBBS degree specifically, for which a lot of Indian students go to Ukraine, it is internationally accredited and is valid in almost every country. Yes, there are bridging examinations, like when you do MBBS in Ukraine and you have to come back to India and practice in India, you have to give a bridging examination. But apart from that, if you clear the examination, you are able to practice in most parts of the country. Secondly, as I said, it is much cheaper as compared to the medical education that we have in India. For medical students, for example, in the best Indian private medical colleges, you would have to pay 15 to 20 lakh per year for about a 5.5 year course of MBBS. For Ukraine, the medical colleges charge somewhere between 2.65 lakh to 3.8 lakh per year. So as you can see, the Indian medical colleges are charging close to 4 to 5 times the fee as compared to the Ukrainian colleges are charging. Not just this, the cost of living also in Ukraine is not very high for Indian students and families. And that is why over the years it has turned into a very reliable source of getting your education for the Indian students specifically. Not just this, there is also no entrance test in most of the MBBS colleges in Ukraine. And because a lot of Indian students have been going to Ukraine year after year, that means there's a large diaspora of India and Indians in Ukraine, and it has become a very familiar country for people from this field. Even the Ukrainian currency is favorable to India, and you can get 1 Ukrainian hryvnia, that is their currency, at close to about 2.5 Indian rupees. So again, not very high cost of conversion, and that is why this country is preferred over many other nations that Indian students would be considering for their higher education. And that is why for the politicians, it might be very easy to say, why is it that the Indian students are going abroad to countries such as Ukraine? But if you see the factors, there are many factors that make Ukraine as a very attractive opportunity for the medical students in India. These are the articles we wanted to discuss from the Hindu newspaper today. Couple of practice questions. Number 1. Highlight some of the reasons behind a large number of medical students in India opting for medical education from nations such as Ukraine, Russia, and China. What initiatives can be taken to fulfill their needs within the country? Second, examine the prominent provisions of the National Child Policy. How far has the government succeeded in implementing these provisions? Both these questions have to be answered within 250 words each. Thank you so much for watching the video.